The vote was already counted before I walked into the chamber. I could feel it in the way 300 alien delegates refused to meet my eyes. My boots echoed on the polished black floor of the Grand Concord Assembly, and every step felt like the last sound a man hears before something breaks. My name is Elias Vance. For 40 years, I served as Earth's ambassador to a galaxy that never wanted us. Today, that galaxy was going to throw us away. The speaker stood at the high pulpit, her silver hair fronds drooping like wilted grass. Her name was Elithasan, and once long ago, she had told me she liked humans because we laughed at our own jokes. She would not look at me now. She tapped the crystal bell 3 times and the chamber went silent. "Ambassador Vance of Earth," she said, "stand and receive the judgment of the conquered." I stood. I had been standing my whole life in one way or another. My hands were folded behind my back, and inside my left palm, hidden under my glove, I held a small black coin. The coin was the only thing that mattered in this entire room, and not one creature in this chamber knew it existed. "For 2 centuries," the speaker said, "humanity has been observed as a probationary species. You were given trade routes. You were given protected status. You were given every chance to grow into the gentle path of the conquered. And yet, again and again, you have shown a nature that frightens us." A delegate from the Krellin Combine hissed in agreement. I watched him without expression. 3 years ago, his cousin had tried to seize a human freighter near the Veli's Belt. The captain of that freighter, a quiet woman named Helena Brooks, had refused to surrender her cargo of medical seeds bound for a colony of children. Instead, she had vented her engines and drifted into the pirate ships, and when the pirates boarded, she had simply walked into her reactor room and turned the keys. 40 raiders died. So did Helena. The galaxy called it savagery. We called it Tuesday afternoon. "You do not surrender," the speaker continued. "You do not bend. When cornered, you choose destruction over compromise. We have watched your wars. We have watched your art. We have watched your songs about lost causes and last stands, and we have come to understand that your species worships an idea we cannot accept. You worship the refusal to break." I almost smiled. She was not wrong. "Therefore," she said, and her voice cracked just a little, "by a vote of 291 to 9, the conquered rules that humanity shall be banished from galactic society. A blockade ring will be constructed at the edge of your home star system. No ship shall enter. No ship shall leave. No signal shall pass. For 1,000 standard years, your kind will be sealed away from the rest of us, until the danger you carry has burned out on its own." The chamber held its breath. They were waiting for me to scream, to beg, to curse them. They had prepared statements for each of these reactions. I had read the leaked drafts in my hotel room last night while drinking a cup of bitter green tea. I did none of those things. I bowed. "Thank you," I said. My voice was clear and steady, and I watched the speaker flinch as if I had struck her. "On behalf of Earth, I accept the ruling of the conquered." A murmur ran through the delegates like wind through dry leaves. They had not expected gratitude. They had expected a man broken in half. The Krellin delegate leaned forward, suspicious. The Ilithi speaker tilted her head, and for one long moment her silver eyes searched my face for some trick, some hidden blade. She found nothing. Of course she found nothing. The blade was already 100 years old, and it had never been in this room. "You may depart, Ambassador," she said softly. "A shuttle will return you to Earth. After your arrival, the blockade will close. May your people find peace in the long quiet ahead." I bowed again. I turned. I walked out of the chamber I had walked into 10,000 times, and I never looked back. My boots made the same sound on the way out as they had made on the way in. Nothing had changed in this room. Everything had changed for the rest of the galaxy, and they would not understand that for at least another 100 years. In the long marble hallway, my old aide was waiting for me. His name was Daniel Hart, a young man with tired eyes and a quiet, careful way of speaking. He had served me for 12 years. He fell into step beside me without a word. "Sir," he said when we reached the lift, "do you want me to draft a public statement? Something for the Earth feeds?" "No, Daniel," I said. "Earth already knows what to say." He glanced at me. He had been with me long enough to know when I was hiding something, and he had also been with me long enough to know when not to ask. He nodded once and pressed the lift button. Down in the docking bay, my shuttle was already prepped. A Concord guard stood at attention, his rifle held loosely. He saluted me as I passed. I returned the salute. There was no anger in me toward him or toward any of them. Anger was a small thing, and I had stopped carrying small things a long time ago. Inside the shuttle, I sat in the front seat and told the pilot to take us up. The little ship lifted off the polished deck and slid out through the great doors of the Concord station. Below us, the planet of the Concord capital glowed soft and blue, with its rings of artificial moons spinning in slow patterns of light. It was beautiful. I had always thought so, even at the end. We slipped into the dark, and the pilot turned us toward the long jump corridor that would carry us home. As soon as the autopilot took over, I dismissed her to the rear cabin. She gave me a strange look, but she went. I was the ambassador. She did not argue. When the cabin door shut behind her, I opened my left glove and looked at the coin in my palm. It was small, smaller than a fingernail, black as the space outside the window. On one side it had no markings at all. On the other side it had 3 small dots arranged in a triangle. It looked like nothing. It looked like a piece of cheap costume jewelry. But this little coin was a transmitter, and it was tuned to a frequency that the Concord's best listeners had cleared as a routine weather pattern from a dead asteroid 40 years ago. I held the coin against the small glass port of the shuttle window. I closed my eyes. I thought of every human face I had ever known. I thought of my mother, who had taught me to plant tomatoes when I was 4 years old. I thought of my wife, who had died a decade before, smiling, telling me to keep going. I thought of all the children of all the worlds we had ever touched, and all the children we would never get to meet if we failed. I pressed the coin 3 times, slow and steady. 3 words went out into the dark. They were not words in any language the Concord could read. They were a pulse, a heartbeat, a promise. To anyone listening on the right channel, in the right corner of the cold black space at the edge of our solar system, those 3 pulses would be translated into one simple human sentence. Open the vault. The coin grew warm in my hand for half a second, then cooled. The signal had gone. I tucked the coin back into my glove and leaned back in my seat. Somewhere on the far side of our sun, in a place the Concord had never thought to look, 11 million quiet machines began to wake up. I let myself smile. I had not smiled in 40 years, not really. The smile felt strange on my face, like a borrowed coat, but it fit. We had spent 2 centuries pretending to be the small, harmless little species the galaxy thought we were. We had begged for membership. We had bowed at every council. We had sent our diplomats and our merchants and our gentle young scientists to every star they would let us visit. And while we did all of that on 1,000 quiet nights in 1,000 quiet labs, we had been building. Not weapons, not warships, something else. Something the Conquered did not have a word for, because no civilization in the galaxy had ever been patient enough or stubborn enough or strange enough to think of it. The pilot's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, jump corridor in 10 seconds. Please secure for transition." I closed my eyes. I pictured Earth. I pictured the blue marble of my home, ringed now by the Concord's blockade buoys, sealed away from the galaxy for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. The Concord had given us 1,000 years to fix every mistake we had ever made. They thought they were burying us. They did not understand. You cannot bury a seed. You can only plant it. The shuttle hit the jump corridor, and the stars stretched into long white lines, and I went home to a planet that had been ready for this day longer than the Concord had been alive to imagine it. When the shuttle landed at the spaceport in Geneva, the sky over the city was the color of beaten copper. The sun was setting behind the old mountains, and the lights of the buildings were just beginning to come on. There was no crowd waiting for me, no reporters, no cameras. The Concord had assumed there would be riots in our streets, mourning in our temples, panic in our markets. There was nothing. There was an old woman selling roasted chestnuts at a cart by the edge of the landing pad. There was a young father holding his daughter's hand and pointing up at the first star of the evening. There were two engineers walking across the field, drinking tea from steel cups, talking about something that made one of them laugh. That was Earth, quiet, stubborn, already at peace with the long road ahead. A car was waiting for me at the edge of the pad. Inside it sat a woman I had not seen in many years. Her name was Myra Oak, and she ran a facility that did not officially exist, in a desert that the conquered satellites had photographed 10,000 times without ever once seeing the truth. She did not greet me with words, she just nodded once. "It went," she asked. "It went," I said. "They believed it. Every word." She closed her eyes for a long moment, and I saw her shoulders loosen, and I understood that she had been holding her breath for 40 years just like I had. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet, but she was smiling. "Then we begin," she said softly. The car pulled away from the spaceport, and behind us, far above the clouds, the conquered blockade ring snapped into place around our solar system. The walls of our cage were sealed. The galaxy turned away, satisfied that the dangerous little 8 people of Earth had been put safely in their box. They had no idea that the box was not a cage. It was a workshop, and the work was about to begin. The desert was cold at 3 in the morning. My breath made small clouds in the air as I stepped out of the lift 200 meters below the sand, and the sound of my boots on the metal floor was the only thing in the long corridor. My name is Myra Oak. I am the chief architect of a project that does not have a name on any official map of Earth, because the project is older than any map of Earth that the conquered has ever been allowed to see. The corridor stretched ahead of me, lit by soft white panels in the ceiling. The walls were plain steel, cool and gray. There was nothing on them. No signs, no warnings, no flags. We had never needed flags here. The people who worked in this place knew what they were doing without being told. I had spent my whole life walking these halls. My mother had walked them before me. Her mother had walked them before her. 3 generations of my family had served this project, and the strangest part was that none of us had ever felt heroic about it. We had felt like gardeners. You do not feel like a hero when you plant a seed. You feel like someone with dirty hands who has agreed to be patient. The control room was at the end of the corridor, behind a heavy door with no lock on it. We did not lock things here. If you were standing in front of this door, you had already been trusted with something far more important than what was behind it. I pushed the door open. The room was wide and round, with a high ceiling and a single great screen that took up the entire far wall. 12 consoles sat in a half-circle facing the screen, and at each console sat a quiet person doing quiet work. None of them looked up when I came in. They were focused. They had been waiting 40 years for this morning, and they were not going to waste it on small talk. At the center console sat a man I had known since I was 7 years old. His name was Henry Caldwell. He was the oldest of us, gray-bearded, slow-moving, with hands that had built more impossible things than any single human in history. He turned when he heard me, and his old eyes crinkled in a small, tired smile. "Myra," he said, "Vance sent the signal." "I know. Are we ready?" I walked to the center console and put my hand on his shoulder. He was warm and solid and real. I thought, for one strange moment, of all the people who had built this place and were no longer alive to see it open. I thought of my mother. I thought of the engineers who had died of old age waiting for this dawn. I thought of every quiet person who had worked in the shadows of the human story for 2 centuries, knowing they would never live to see the end of it. "We are ready," I said. "Open the vault." Henry nodded. He turned back to his console. His old fingers moved across the keys with the gentle confidence of a man playing a song he had practiced his entire life. The great screen on the far wall came alive, and a map of our solar system filled it in soft blue light. The map showed our sun in the center. The 8 planets sat in their orbits like familiar pebbles on a familiar path. The asteroid belt glowed in a thin gold ring. Far out, beyond Pluto, beyond the Kuiper belt, beyond everything the conquered had ever bothered to scan in detail, lay a region of space we called the Quiet. It was the Uit cloud, the great cold shell of frozen rocks and ancient ice that wrapped around our entire star system at a distance, so vast that light itself took a year to cross part of it. The conquered blockade ring sat at the heliopause, just inside the inner edge of the quiet. The conquered had assumed that nothing important could exist beyond that line, nothing useful, nothing worth defending. They had built their cage around our home, and they had drawn the bars exactly where they thought the edge of our reach ended. They were wrong. The screen zoomed out. The blockade ring became a thin line of red dots, and beyond that line, beyond the heliopause, in the cold and the dark of the Uit cloud, the map began to light up. One light, then two, then 10, then 1,000, then 100,000. The lights kept coming. They came in waves, in tides, in great rolling sweeps across the map, until the entire shell of the Uit cloud was glowing soft blue, like a second sun made of nothing but small, steady points of patience. 11 million machines, each the size of a small refrigerator, each made of the toughest, simplest, most reliable materials we knew how to forge, each one carrying a tiny seed of human knowledge, human culture, human memory, and human stubbornness, each one capable of building a copy of itself out of any rock or chunk of ice it could reach. We had been seeding the quiet for 120 years. The conquered had never seen a single one of them because the machines had been built to be silent. They emitted no heat that mattered. They reflected no light that mattered. They drifted in the cold dark like smooth black stones in a frozen river, and they had been waiting. Now they woke up. Henry leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. "There they are," he said softly. "All of them, every one. 40 years of dormancy and not a single failure." A young engineer at the console to my left, a woman named Clara Bishop, looked up with shining eyes. "Dr. Oak," she said, "the first replication wave is starting." I walked over and looked at her screen. The wave she was tracking was a small one. The first generation. The 11 million machines were already beginning to reach out with their quiet tools and harvest the simple raw materials of the Uit cloud, the ice and the dust and the loose rock, and they were beginning to build. In 1 hour, there would be 22 million. In 1 day, there would be billions. In 1 year, there would be more of them than there were grains of sand on Earth's largest beaches. The conquered had given us 1,000 years. We did not need 1,000 years. We needed 40. "Doctor," Clara said, "should I start the cultural broadcast?" I nodded. "Begin with the first archive, slow and steady. There is no rush." Clara turned back to her console. Across the half-circle of stations, the other engineers began their own quiet work. One was tracking the spread of the replication wave. Another was monitoring the pressure of the blockade ring, watching for any conquered ship that might come too close. Another was preparing the next archive of human knowledge to be uploaded into the new generation of machines as they came online. Henry cleared his throat. "Myra," he said, "there is something you should see." I went back to his console. He pointed at the screen. He had zoomed in on a small section of the Uit cloud where the very first machine had woken up. That machine was a special one. It was called Probe Zero. It was the original, the prototype, the seed from which all the rest had been grown. My mother had personally overseen its launch when I was a child. Probe Zero had a small camera on its outer shell. It had not used that camera in 40 years. Now, slowly, the camera was opening for the first time since my mother had closed it. The image came in faint and gray at first, then sharpened. Probe Zero was looking at something. It was looking at our sun, far in the distance, a small bright dot at the center of a vast black sea. And around that small bright dot, our entire solar system, all 8 planets, all the asteroids, all the small worlds we had ever known, sat tucked safely inside the blockade ring. But Probe Zero was not looking at the sun. It was looking past the sun, into the deeper galaxy, into the lights of distant stars, into the future. I stood there for a long time, watching that image. I did not say anything. None of us did. We just watched the cold camera of an old machine looking out into a galaxy that had thrown us away, and we understood, all of us at once, what was about to happen. We were not going to escape from our cage. We were never going to escape from our cage. The cage was going to escape from us, around us, past us, through us. 11 million machines becoming 100 million, becoming a billion, becoming a number too large to write down. They would slip past the blockade not in one great rush but in a slow, quiet tide, the way water finds every crack in a stone wall over time. And they would carry pieces of us with them, pieces of our knowledge, pieces of our music, pieces of our oldest stories. We were going to seed the galaxy, not with weapons, not with armies, with ourselves, quietly, patiently, without permission but also without harm, like a forest growing through the ruins of an empty city. Henry put his hand over mine where it rested on the back of his chair. His hand was old and warm and shaking just a little. "My grandmother started this," he said quietly. "She built the first prototype in her kitchen. She was a chemistry teacher. She thought it would never work." "My mother thought the same thing," I said. "And here we are," Henry said. "Here we are." We stood there in the soft blue light of the screen, watching 11 million tiny lights bloom in the dark beyond our sun, and I felt something I had not felt in many years. I felt small, not in a sad way, in a good way. I felt like one bead in a long, long string of beads, and the string was longer than any one life could ever measure. A soft chime came from one of the consoles. Clara turned. "Dr. Oak," she said, "we have a problem." I went to her station immediately. "What kind of problem?" She pointed at her screen. "A Concord patrol ship just changed course. It is on a slow sweep of the inner edge of the Uit cloud. It will pass within 3 light minutes of one of our replication clusters in about 6 hours. I felt my stomach tighten. "Will it see anything?" Clara shook her head slowly. "Not visually. The shielding is good, but if it does a deep gravitational sweep, it might pick up the mass anomaly from the new generation of machines. That cluster is already bigger than it was an hour ago, and it is growing fast." Henry came up beside me. He looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he turned to me, and his old eyes were calm. "Myra," he said, "do you trust the plan?" I thought about it. I thought about all the simulations we had run. I thought about the protocols we had built into every machine. I thought about the people who had designed those protocols, people who had been gone for 20, 30, 50 years, people who had never met me but had trusted me anyway. "I trust the plan," I said. "Then we let the plan work," Henry said. He turned to Clara. "Tell the cluster to go quiet. No new replications until the patrol ship passes. The machines we already have will keep working at minimum output. Hide the new ones in the ice." Clara nodded and began typing. I watched her hands move, and I thought about how strange it was that the entire fate of my species might rest on whether 11 million small machines in the dark could be patient for 6 hours. But of course they could be patient. We had built them to be patient. They were us in our purest form. They were the part of us that the conquered had never understood, the part that could wait, the part that could plant a seed and not need to see the tree. 6 hours later, the conquered patrol ship swept past our cluster on its slow, lazy curve. It saw nothing. It scanned nothing. It logged a routine, boring shift and moved on. Aboard that ship, the captain was probably annoyed at having drawn such a quiet duty. He had no idea that he had just passed within 3 light minutes of the largest construction project in the history of any species he would ever meet, and that the project had simply held its breath while he went by, because we had decided he was not worth the trouble of being seen. When the ship was gone, Clara turned to me. "Cluster going active again, Doctor." The lights on the great screen began to multiply once more. I left the control room some hours later. The desert above us was cold and dark, and the stars were so bright that you could see your own shadow by them. I walked out alone to the edge of the dunes, and I stood for a long time looking up. Somewhere out there, far past the blockade ring, 11 million children of human hands were building, building, building. They would never tire. They would never doubt. They would never argue about who got the credit. They would simply work quietly, the way humans had worked in the small, dark corners of every century since the first one of us had picked up a stone and decided to make it into something useful. 40 years, that was our timeline, not 1,040. In 40 years, the galaxy would begin to notice that something was different. They would not know what. They would not know why. They would see small, strange things happening at the edges of their maps, and they would file reports, and the reports would be filed away, and nobody would understand for a long time. By the time they understood, it would already be too late. I walked back to the lift in the dark. The wind was rising over the dunes, and the night was very, very quiet. We had been banished. We had said thank you. And now we were going to give the galaxy a gift it had not asked for, and could not refuse, and would not understand for 100 years. The work had begun. My name is Tivkorin Aleshi, and I am only a low-rank intelligence analyst of the SSH Helen hegemony. I tell you this so you understand that I am not an important person. I am the kind of person who reads small reports about small things in small star systems and writes longer reports about them and sends those reports to people who throw them in a drawer. I have done this work for 18 years. I am good at it. I am also tired. The morning everything began, I was eating a bowl of cold protein paste at my desk in the listening station above the planet Tesvine. Tesvine is a quiet world on the rim of conquered space. Nothing happens there. That is why I was sent there. They send analysts who do not cause trouble to the places where trouble does not happen, and we sit in our small offices, and we monitor our small assignments, and we eat our cold paste. My assignment for the last 18 years has been the human quarantine zone, the Sol blockade ring. I watch the empty box where the dangerous little 8 people used to live. Once a week, a routine ping from the blockade buoys reaches my console. Once a week, I file a report that says nothing has changed. Once a week, my superiors do not read that report, and they do not need to because nothing has changed. That morning, something changed. The signal came in at the start of my shift. It was not a normal weekly ping. It was a flag, a real flag, a flashing yellow icon on my screen that I had never seen go off in 18 years of watching it sit there. I almost dropped my paste bowl. I called up the report. The flag was coming from a conquered mining outpost called Drell Station, which sat at the inner edge of conquered space, 3 sectors away from the human quarantine zone. The outpost was small, just a fueling and ore processing platform, with a crew of about 50 workers from a dozen different species. The flag had been raised because Drell Station had stopped responding to communications for 48 standard hours, and a conquered patrol ship had been dispatched to investigate. The patrol ship had reached Drell Station 6 hours ago. The patrol captain had filed a preliminary report. That report had been forwarded to me because the situation, in the captain's careful words, did not match any known incident pattern. When something does not match a pattern, the system flags an analyst. I was the analyst on duty, so now it was my problem. I read the captain's report. The patrol ship had docked at Drell Station and found the airlocks unlocked, the lights on, the air pressure normal. The ship's life support systems were running smoothly. The kitchen had food on the counter. There were teacups on the workers' tables, half finished, still slightly warm to the touch. But there was no crew. 50 workers, gone, not dead, not injured, just absent. Their personal belongings were still in their bunks. Their work logs showed normal activity right up until the moment communication stopped. There were no signs of a struggle, no alarm signals, no emergency broadcasts. The crew had simply vanished in the middle of an ordinary working day without leaving a single trace. That was strange enough on its own, but that was not what made my hands cold. What made my hands cold was the second part of the report. Every piece of metal on Drell Station had been replaced. I had to read that line 3 times before I understood what the captain meant. He explained it slowly because he had not understood it himself at first. Every wall plate, every bolt, every panel, every wire, every spoon, every tool, every piece of metal in the entire outpost down to the smallest screw had been swapped out for an exact copy of itself. The new copies were identical to the old ones in shape and size and weight. They were also of slightly higher purity. The metals were cleaner, the alloys more even, the surfaces more perfectly finished, as if every piece had been carefully remade by an artist who had decided the original was good, but could be made just a little bit better. The captain had no idea how this had been done. There was no sign of any equipment, no machines left behind, no factory, no tools, just the station sitting quietly in the dark with its slightly nicer metal and its missing crew. And one more thing. On the inside of the main airlock door, someone had etched a message. The etching was deep and clean, cut into the new metal as if with the gentlest possible touch. The message was written in 200 separate languages. The captain's translation engine had recognized 197 of them. The other 3 were unknown. They were not in any database the Concord maintained. They appeared to be languages that had never been recorded before, anywhere, by anyone. The message in all 200 languages said the same thing. "We were here. We are sorry for the inconvenience." I sat at my desk for a long time without moving. My paste bowl sat forgotten in front of me. My tea went cold. Outside my small office window, the orange clouds of Tess Veen drifted slowly across the sky, and I watched them without seeing them. Sorry for the inconvenience. Who writes that? Who makes a 50-person crew disappear without a trace, rebuilds an entire space station atom by atom, and then leaves a polite note about the inconvenience? I knew the answer. I did not want to know the answer, but I knew it. It was the humans. Of course it was the humans. Nobody else in the galaxy would do something so strange and so polite and so terrifying at the same time. The Krellin would have left a war banner. The Alethi would have left a long philosophical poem. The SSH Helen, my own people, would have left nothing at all and pretended it had never happened. Only the humans would write a note. But the humans were behind a blockade ring. The humans were sealed away in their solar system. The humans had no ships, no relay stations, no way to reach a Concord outpost 3 sectors away. It was impossible. I filed my analysis. I marked it priority high. I sent it up the chain. My superiors classified it and buried it. I went home that night and did not sleep. That was the first one. There were going to be many more. 2 weeks later, a pirate fleet vanished. This was good news in the abstract sense. The fleet had been raiding shipping lanes near the Veli's Belt for the better part of a year. 12 ships, about 400 raiders. They were the kind of people nobody wanted to deal with. The Concord had put a bounty on them. 3 different navies had been hunting them. Nobody had managed to catch them. Then they jumped into a routine wormhole transit and did not come out the other side. The Concord assumed they had suffered a transit accident. These things happened. 12 ships lost, 400 unpleasant people gone. Case closed. Move on. A year later, the fleet came back. They came out of the same wormhole, all 12 ships, with all 400 crew alive and well. They surrendered themselves to the nearest Concord patrol without firing a single shot. They came peacefully. They asked for legal counsel. They confessed to all their previous crimes and asked to be sentenced. Every single one of them, when interviewed, was a vegetarian. Every single one of them had developed an unexplained love for an old style of human music called jazz. Every single one of them, when asked what had happened during the missing year, gave the same calm answer. We had a long conversation. We were given time to think. We changed our minds. That was all, nothing more. They would not say where they had been. They would not say who they had spoken with. They would not describe what their captors had looked like, or whether they had been captives at all. They smiled politely when asked, and they gently changed the subject, and they ate their plates of vegetables and listened to their old jazz music in the holding cells of 3 different Concord prison stations. This report also reached my desk. I filed it. I marked it priority high. I sent it up the chain. My superiors classified it and buried it. I started keeping a private journal. The third incident was the one that made me lose sleep for a full week. There was a small star in a remote sector called Helen's Reach. The star was very old. It was dying. Its core was collapsing. Astrophysicists from the Concord had been studying it for 100 years because dying stars are useful to study. They had calculated with great precision that the star would go through a slow gravitational collapse in approximately 600 years, which would destroy its 3 small inhabited moons. The civilizations on those moons were primitive, pre-spaceflight, and the conquered had a long-standing rule against interfering with such cultures. So the conquered had begun a very quiet, very slow, very expensive plan to evacuate the moons over the next several centuries, without letting the inhabitants know what was coming. It was a sad situation. Everyone agreed it was sad. There was no good solution. Then one day, the star stopped collapsing. I want to be clear about what I am saying. The star did not blow up. It did not stabilize through any natural process. It did not behave according to any known law of stellar physics. It simply, gently, stopped doing what it had been doing for 100 years and began doing something else. Its core began to slowly, carefully, methodically rearrange itself into a more stable configuration. The collapse paused. The star began to heal. The astrophysicists ran the numbers 1,000 times, then 1,000 more. The conclusion was the same every time. Someone or something had reached into the heart of a dying star and made gentle adjustments to its fusion processes. The adjustments were so small and so careful that they would not have been visible to anyone not looking very hard, but they were unmistakably the work of an intelligence. And they were unmistakably done with great care, with great kindness, and with no intention of ever being noticed. The 3 moons would live now. The civilizations on them would flourish, never knowing they had been saved. The conquered's evacuation plan was no longer needed. The astrophysicists were thrilled. The intelligence services were horrified. In every incident my journal began to note, there was a signature, a small thing, a single hydrogen atom, somewhere in the affected system, arranged in a perfect geometric pattern that should not be possible without rewriting the local laws of physics. On Drell Station, the atom had been at the center of the airlock message. In the pirate fleet ships, the atom had been at the heart of every ship's computer core. In the dying star of Helen's Reach, the atom had been buried at the very center of the stellar core, like a quiet seed. The signature was always the same, a single atom bent into the shape of a tiny 6-pointed star. I did not know what the 6-pointed star meant, but I knew in the cold of my private office at 3 in the morning that whoever was leaving these signatures was not asking permission, not from the conquered, not from anyone. They were doing what they thought was right, and they were doing it on a scale that frightened me more than any war I had ever read about. Wars I understood. Wars had goals. Wars had territory. Wars had treaties at the end of them. This was something else. This was a civilization that did not want territory, did not want treaties, did not want acknowledgement. They wanted to help. They wanted to fix things. They wanted to leave little polite notes on the airlocks of stations they had quietly upgraded for no reason. That was so much worse than a war. A war can be lost. A war can be won. But how do you fight a neighbor who keeps showing up to mow your lawn while you are asleep? I started compiling everything. Every report. Every incident. Every signature. I built a private database in a corner of my office that no one else used. I stayed late every night, eating my cold paste, drinking my cold tea, reading reports from every corner of the galaxy. The pattern was everywhere now. Hundreds of incidents, going back at least 15 years. Plagues cured overnight by medications that arrived in unmarked containers, with dosage instructions written, in one case, in crayon by what forensic linguists insisted was a child of about 6 years old. Wars stopped by sudden, simultaneous outbreaks of food and fresh water on both sides of disputed borders. Lost ships found drifting in the dark, fully repaired with their crews safely aboard, none of whom remembered anything except a feeling of having been somewhere warm. Famines ended. Diseases cured. Quiet, careful, kindly interventions scattered across 2,000 light-years of conquered territory, every one of them carrying the mark of the 6-pointed star. I went to my supervisor. His name was Vrel Tamesh, and he was a tired old SSH Helen with a long career and a short temper. I brought him my database. I showed him the pattern. He looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the file and looked at me. "Tiv Koren," he said quietly, Do you know how many civilizations would lose their footing if this became public? Sir, I said, I think people deserve to know. People, he said, deserve to keep believing the universe makes sense. Do you understand? I understood. He was telling me to bury it. He was telling me, the way my superiors had been telling me for 18 years, that the work I did not matter and was not meant to matter. He was telling me to be a good little analyst and file my little reports and go home and eat my paste. I went home. I did not eat my paste. I sat at my window and watched the orange clouds, and I thought about the human ambassador I had seen on the news feeds 2 centuries ago, the day humanity had been banished. He had been an old man even then. I remembered his face. He had bowed politely to the conquered speaker after the verdict. He had said thank you. He had walked out of the chamber without a single tear or shout. I had thought at the time that he was a defeated man. I understood now that he had been a man who already knew the end of the story. Somewhere out there, beyond a blockade ring that everyone had assumed was a cage, the humans had been doing something for 200 years. I did not know what. I did not know how. But I knew, with a cold certainty I could not explain, that the galaxy I had grown up in was not the galaxy I lived in anymore. The walls had not been broken. The walls had been ignored. The galaxy had been quietly, patiently, kindly reshaped around them, and almost no one had noticed. I opened my journal. I wrote one sentence at the top of a new page. They are already here. Then I closed the journal and I went to bed, and for the first time in 18 years, I dreamed about the dangerous little 8 people of Earth. And in the dream, they were not dangerous, and they were not little, and they were not what I had been told they were. They were gardeners, and they were watering the galaxy. My name is Elithisan Verais. I am old, very old, even by the long measure of my species, and I am the last living member of the council that voted, 2 centuries ago, to banish humanity from the galaxy. I never expected to be alive on the day the Conquered came to me and asked me to help fix what we had done. I had hoped to be in the quiet earth of my home garden long before this day arrived. The universe rarely grants me the things I hope for. They came to my house in the early evening, 3 of them in formal robes. 2 were senior diplomats. The third was a young intelligence officer with the calm gray eyes of a person who had recently stopped sleeping well. I recognized that look. I had worn it myself long ago. I invited them in. I served them tea because old habits do not die even at the end of a long life. The senior diplomat, a tall woman of the Drennan species, set her cup down without drinking from it. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Speaker Verais," she said, "we need your help." "I am not the speaker anymore," I said gently. "I have not been the speaker for 140 years. "You are the only living person who voted on the Earth banishment," she said. "We need someone who understands the old decision, because the new situation requires us to undo it." I almost laughed. I am too old to laugh mostly, but I almost did. I looked at her over the rim of my own cup and I waited. She told me what had been happening. She told me about Drell Station. She told me about the pirate fleet that had returned as vegetarians. She told me about the dying star that had healed itself. She told me about the plagues and the famines and the wars that had been quietly, gently, unilaterally ended. She told me about the 6-pointed star signatures, the polite notes, the children's crayon dosage instructions. She talked for nearly 2 hours, and the tea grew cold in our cups, and I did not interrupt her once. When she was finished, the young intelligence officer leaned forward. He had not spoken before. His voice was soft. "Speaker," he said, "we estimate that by now somewhere between 40 and 60% of the civilizations in conquered territory have benefited from at least one human intervention. Probably more. Most of them do not know it. Many of them will never know it. The interventions are not advertised. They are simply done. Quietly, carefully, without payment, without acknowledgement, without any visible structure of command or organization." I closed my eyes. I could feel the weight of every year of my long life sitting on my shoulders. "And the blockade ring?" I asked. "Still intact," the young officer said. "Not a single human ship has crossed it. Not one. By every measure we can use, the quarantine is a complete success. The humans have not escaped. They have not invaded, they have not communicated. And yet, I said. And yet, he agreed. I opened my eyes and looked at him. He was a good young man. I could tell. He had the face of someone who still believed the truth was worth knowing, even when knowing it was painful. Tell me, I said, what do you think they are? He took a long time to answer. He looked down at his cold tea. He turned the cup slowly between his fingers. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. I think we made a mistake, he said. I think we banished a young species because we were afraid of what they would become. And I think in banishing them, we gave them the one thing we should have most feared giving them. We gave them time. 200 years of uninterrupted time with no one watching, no one trading with them, no one distracting them. 200 years to think. 200 years to build. 200 years to become whatever they decided to become, with no influence from the rest of us. And what did they decide to become? He looked up at me. I do not know, nobody does, but whatever it is, it does not match any pattern in our histories. They are not conquerors, they are not missionaries, they are not even traders, they are something else, something we do not have a word for. I nodded slowly. I had suspected this for some time. I had been retired for many years, but I had still received the quiet briefings, the careful summaries, the occasional whispered visits from old colleagues who needed to talk to someone who remembered the original decision. I had watched the strange events of the last 2 decades from my garden. I had drawn my own conclusions. The young officer's words simply confirmed what I already feared. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The senior diplomat answered. "We have called an emergency vote of the full Concord. The vote is in 3 days. The proposal on the table is to formally lift the quarantine, send a delegation to Earth, and offer humanity full membership in the Concord, along with a public apology for the original banishment. And you want me to support this proposal. Speaker Verais, you are the only living person whose support would carry the moral weight to make this proposal pass without 1,000 years of debate. The young delegates do not understand the original vote. They have only read about it. You were there. You voted yes. If you stand up now and say the vote was wrong, the Concord will follow you." I sat in my chair for a long time. I looked out the window at my garden. The light was fading. The flowers were closing for the night. Somewhere far above the clouds, a galaxy was changing, slowly and quietly, and the people who lived in it were beginning to understand that they had been wrong about something very important for a very long time. "I will do it," I said, "but I have one condition." "Anything." "Before the vote, I want to see the evidence myself, all of it. Not the briefings, not the summaries, the raw evidence, the reports, the signatures, the places they have touched. I want to walk through one of these incidents with my own feet. I want to see what they have done." The senior diplomat hesitated. "Speaker, that will take time. The closest active site is several days of travel away." "I am 273 years old," I said. "I have time." We left the next morning. The site they took me to was a small inhabited moon in a forgotten sector. The moon's name was Bellies. It was home to about 2 million people of a species called the Quorum, a quiet farming culture that had been on the very edge of starvation for the last 50 years due to a slow collapse of their main grain crop. The Concord had been sending aid for decades, but the aid was thin and the situation was bleak. The Quorum had been preparing themselves, with great dignity, for the slow ending of their world. 3 months ago, the grain crop had returned. It had not just recovered, it had transformed. The Quorum's main grain, a tough purple stalk called Bellies root, had developed in a single growing season a new ability to draw nutrients from the moon's mineral-poor soil. The plants now grew larger than they had grown in 1,000 years. They produced more grain than the Quorum could eat. Famine had ended overnight. When Quorum botanists studied the new plants, they discovered that the change was genetic. Something had altered the Bellies root's deep genetic code in every plant on every farm, across the entire moon in a single growing season. The change was elegant. It was efficient. It was the work of a species with a far greater understanding of plant biology than the Quorum possessed, or the Concord possessed. The botanists also discovered something else. In the genetic code of the new Bellies root, embedded inside a section that did nothing for the plant itself, there was a small geometric pattern. The pattern was made of base pairs, arranged in the unmistakable shape of a six-pointed star. I walked through the Bellies root fields myself, with my old hands trailing through the tall purple stalks. The wind was warm. The sky was a soft pink. Quorum children ran past me, laughing, their faces full and healthy in a way that no quorum child had been for 50 years. Their parents stood by the edge of the fields and watched their children with the dazed eyes of people who had been preparing for a funeral and had been given a wedding instead. A quorum elder approached me. She was very old, almost as old as I was, with a face like worn stone. She bowed. "Speaker," she said, "is it true what they say, that we have been touched by a species we have never met?" "Yes," I said, "it seems to be true." "Will they ever come and tell us who they are?" I thought about it for a long time. The wind moved through the purple grain, and the laughter of the children carried across the field. "No," I said gently, "I do not think they will. I think they have decided that being known is not the point." The quorum elder closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her stone face. "Then how do we thank them?" "I do not think you can. I do not think they want to be thanked. I think they only want you to live." She stood there for a long time, weeping into the warm wind. I stood beside her. We did not speak. That night in the small guest house the quorum had given me, I sat by an open window and looked up at the stars. I thought about the day, 2 centuries ago, when I had stood at the high pulpit of the Grand Concord Assembly and read out the verdict that banished humanity from the galaxy. I thought about Ambassador Vance, the old man with the steady eyes, who had bowed to me and thanked me and walked away. I had thought at the time that I was offering mercy. I had thought I was protecting the galaxy from a young species that had not yet learned to be gentle. I had been wrong. I had been wrong in a way that would take me the rest of my long life to fully understand. I had not banished a dangerous people. I had banished a patient people. And the patient people, given time and space and silence, had become something the dangerous galaxy had never been brave enough to become on its own. They had become quietly kind, on a scale we could not measure, without payment, without recognition, without any need to be seen. And we, in our wisdom, had locked them away from us for 1,000 years. I went to my bed that night and I did not sleep, and I thought about the vote that was coming in 2 days, and I knew what I was going to do. The Grand Concord Assembly was full to standing room when I walked in, 300 delegations, thousands of observers, the galleries packed with reporters from 100 worlds. The hush that fell when I entered was the deepest I had heard in my long life. I was older than every other being in the room by a wide margin. They watched me walk down the long aisle the way you watch your grandparent walk into a room they will not walk out of, with reverence, with sadness, with something close to fear. I climbed the small steps to the high pulpit. I had not stood at this pulpit in 140 years. The wood under my hands was the same wood I remembered. It had been polished 1,000 times since my last visit, but it was the same. Some things do not change. I looked out at the assembly. I let the silence hold for a long moment. Then I spoke. "I am a Lithusan Verais," I said. 203 years ago, I stood in this exact place on this exact wood, and I voted to banish humanity from the galaxy. I voted yes. I led that vote. I told myself at the time that I was being merciful. I told myself I was protecting the galaxy from a dangerous young species that did not yet understand the gentle way. I paused. The chamber was so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the air recycling system. I was wrong. The murmur that ran through the chamber was like the tide. I waited for it to settle. I was wrong about humanity. I was wrong about what banishment would do to them. I was wrong about what banishment would do to us. I thought I was sealing away a danger. I was, in fact, sealing away the only species in the galaxy that ever truly believed the universe could be made better. And I was sealing them away from the rest of us, who needed them more than any of us had the courage to admit. I looked across the chamber. I saw young delegates whose great-grandparents had not been born when I had cast my original vote. I saw old delegates who remembered the original vote and who had defended it for 200 years. I saw the senior diplomat from the Drennan, who had come to my home with cold tea and trembling hands. I saw the young intelligence officer with the gray eyes, sitting in the gallery, watching me. For 200 years, I said, humanity has been quietly fixing things, not for us, not for praise, not for trade, just because they could, just because someone needed it done and they were willing to do it and they did not need any of us to know they had done it. They have healed dying stars. They have ended famines on worlds we had given up on. They have cured plagues we did not have the courage to cure. They have stopped wars by being kinder than the people who were fighting them. They have done all of this without leaving their home star system. They have done all of this from inside the cage we built around them, because the cage was never strong enough to hold the kind of patient kindness that they had quietly chosen to become. I lifted my old hand. My voice was clear and steady, and I did not feel 273 years old anymore. I felt like the young speaker who had been asked to make a hard decision and who had finally, after a long life, learned how to make the right one. I move, I said, that the conquered vote today in this chamber to lift the quarantine on Earth, to dismantle the blockade ring, to send a delegation to humanity not with offers of membership but with a simple question. The question is this: will you forgive us? The chamber went silent. Then the Drennan diplomat stood up. She raised her hand to second the motion. Then 100 more delegates stood. Then 1,000. Then every person in the chamber slowly, one by one, until the entire Grand Conquered Assembly was on its feet and the vote was called and the result was unanimous. I sat down on the small bench behind the pulpit. I closed my eyes. I felt very tired and very old and very, very glad. The delegation was sent 2 weeks later. It was led by the senior diplomat. The young intelligence officer went with them. They carried no weapons. They carried no demands. They carried only a message, and the message was the question. I did not go with them. I was too old and the journey was long and I had said what I needed to say. I went home to my garden. I sat among my flowers. I watched the sky. I waited to find out what humanity would say. My name is Elias Vance. I am 243 years old, and I am the last man alive who remembers the day we were banished. I have outlived every member of the council that judged us, every aide who served me, every diplomat who walked beside me, every friend I had on the day I sent the signal that opened the vault. I have outlived my wife by more than 2 centuries. I have outlived my children. I am the last keeper of the original promise, and today I am going to keep it. I am sitting in a small wooden ship at the edge of the blockade ring. The ship is made of oak and birch, with brass fittings and a single mast. From the outside, it looks like something that should not be capable of crossing a river, much less an ocean of stars. But it is. The wood is grown from trees that drank from soil seeded with our oldest machines, and the brass is mined from asteroids by our quietest hands, and the engines, hidden under the deck, are technologies that the galaxy will not understand for another 1,000 years. The ship is a kind of joke. It is a quiet, gentle joke that humanity has chosen to make at this moment, because we want the people who meet us today to understand, immediately, that we are not what they expected. The conquered delegation is approaching. I can see their ship on the simple wooden compass at my elbow. 3 of them. A senior diplomat from a species called the Drennan, 2 assistants, and a young intelligence officer with the gray eyes of a person who has been losing sleep over something for a long time. They are flying a beautiful silver vessel shaped like a curved leaf, with flowing lines and gentle lights, and they have been coming toward me for the last hour. I have been alone here for 3 days. I came alone on purpose. There is no one else from Earth aboard this little wooden ship. I am old and I am tired, but the vault that we opened 2 centuries ago has done its work, and the galaxy is now a place where one old man in a wooden boat can wait for an apology without needing any guard or weapon to keep him safe. The galaxy did not know it was already this kind of place, but it was. We had made it so, slowly, patiently, without telling anyone. The silver leaf ship slows. It comes to a stop a respectful distance from me. The senior diplomat hails me on the simplest possible communications band. Her voice is calm and beautiful, and she introduces herself with great formality. I respond in her own language, I welcome her, I invite her aboard. She comes alone in a small shuttle, dressed in formal robes the color of fresh snow. She lands her shuttle on the deck of my little wooden ship, which is bigger inside than it appears from outside, because we long ago stopped caring about the difference between inside and outside in any way the conquered would understand. She steps out. She looks around at the wood and the brass and the simple quiet of the deck. She looks at me. I am sitting in a wooden chair at the back of the ship by the wheel. I am dressed in a plain gray coat. My hair is white. My hands are folded in my lap. I look like an old farmer waiting for a sunset. Ambassador Vance, she says. Just Elias, please, I say. I have not been an ambassador for a very long time. She walks slowly toward me. She stops a few paces away. She bows. She bows so deeply that her forehead nearly touches the deck. She holds the bow for a long time. When she finally rises, there are tears on her face. On behalf of the conquered, she says, I have come to ask whether humanity will forgive us. I look at her for a long moment. I think about every council member who voted to banish us 2 centuries ago. I think about the young speaker, Elithasan, who had bowed her head with such genuine pity as she read out our sentence. I think about how she had thought she was being kind. I think about how she was still alive, somewhere far away, an ancient figure now, who had cast the deciding vote 2 weeks ago to send this woman to me. I am not angry. I have not been angry in a very long time. Anger is a small thing, and it would not fit on this little ship. Tell me, I say gently, what you have come to offer. She begins her prepared speech. She tells me that the conquered has voted to lift the quarantine, that the blockade ring has already begun to be dismantled, that the conquered wishes to offer humanity full and immediate membership, with seats on every council, voting rights in every chamber, and a public apology to be read aloud in every assembly across galactic space. She tells me that the conquered has prepared a treaty of partnership, a treaty of trade, a treaty of mutual defense, and a treaty of cultural exchange. She tells me that humanity will be welcomed home. She finishes. She looks at me with hope in her tired eyes. I let the silence sit between us for a long time. The stars wheel slowly past the deck. A small breeze, generated by the ship for comfort, ruffles my white hair. My friend, I say finally, I thank you. I thank the conquered. I thank Elithasan Verais, whose courage in casting the final vote I have known about for some time, and I am very sorry to tell you that humanity declines. Her face goes pale. She does not understand. She had prepared for many possible answers. She had not prepared for this one. Declines, she says, declines to join the conquered. Declines to join, declines to be a member, declines to sign the treaties, declines to take seats, declines all of it. But why? Her voice is very small. Surely we can offer you anything you want. Anything. Reparations, compensation, whatever you need to repair what we did. You do not understand, I say gently. And that is why we decline. We decline because you do not understand. And we decline kindly because you cannot help not understanding, and we do not want to punish you for it. She is silent, she waits. I stand up slowly. My old bones complain, but they hold. I walk to the railing of the ship. I look out at the stars. The dismantled pieces of the blockade ring drift past in the dark, slowly tumbling, their lights gone out forever. They look like a wedding ring left on a nightstand by someone who has quietly walked out of the marriage. For 200 years, I say, we built, not weapons, not warships, not empires. We built ourselves, quietly, patiently, without anyone watching. We grew in directions the galaxy did not have words for. We became something that does not fit into your charters and your councils and your treaties, not because we are better than you. We are not better. We are not worse. We are simply different now. Different in a way that is not compatible with the way the conquered is built. What way, she asks. What way are you different? I turn to look at her. Her face is wet with tears, and her eyes are searching mine for an answer that will let her go home with something to report. We do not need permission, I say. She frowns. I do not understand. Of course you do not. That is the gentle joke of it. The conquered is built on permission, on agreements, on treaties, on who is allowed to do what, where, and to whom. The whole architecture of your civilization is based on the idea that important things must be agreed upon by councils before they can happen. We used to be like that too. We had councils, we had treaties, we had laws about who was allowed to help whom. I put my old hand on the wooden railing. The wood is warm under my palm. Then we were given 200 years alone, with no councils to ask, no treaties to sign, no one to give us permission for anything. And in that time we slowly stopped needing permission. We learned to ask only one question before we did anything. The question was, will this help? If the answer was yes, we did it. If the answer was no, we did not. We did not ask whose territory we were in. We did not ask whose charter we were violating. We did not ask whose pride we were bruising. We just asked, will this help? And we acted accordingly. She is staring at me. She is beginning to understand, and she is beginning to be afraid. That, I say softly, is why we cannot join the conquered. Because if we joined, we would have to start asking permission again. We would have to file requests. We would have to wait for votes. We would have to let dying stars die because the paperwork was not finished. We would have to let plague spread because the consent forms were still being drafted. We would have to let children starve because their planet was not in a member jurisdiction. And we will not do that. We have learned not to do that. We will not unlearn it now. I turn back to her. I smile gently. We will continue as we have been continuing. We will keep healing what we can heal. We will keep helping where help is wanted. We will withdraw quietly from any place that does not want us the moment they tell us to leave. We will never take territory. We will never demand recognition. We will never invade. We will never punish. We will simply continue. For as long as we exist, we will continue. And the galaxy can join us or not join us or ignore us or thank us or curse us. It does not matter. We are not asking. She is crying openly now. She steps toward me. She reaches out as if to take my hand. What do you want from us? She whispers. Tell me what you want. Tell me what we have to give you. I will give it. I will fight for it in every assembly. Whatever you want, just tell me. I take her hand. Her hand is small in mine. She is much older than she looks, but she feels like a child to me, because everyone feels like a child to me now. I squeeze her hand gently. My friend, I say, we do not want anything. We never wanted anything. That was always the part you could not understand. She closes her eyes. She is shaking. She holds my hand for a long time, and we stand there together at the railing of my little wooden ship, watching the dismantled blockade ring drift past in the dark. When she finally speaks again, her voice is very quiet. What do I tell them when I go back? Tell them the truth. Tell them humanity is grateful for the apology. Tell them we accept it fully and without reservation. Tell them that we wish them well. Tell them that we will not be joining the conquered and that we ask only to be allowed to continue our work. Tell them that we will not interfere in their politics. Tell them that we will not take their territory. Tell them that we will simply keep being what we have become and that they are welcome to learn from us or not learn from us as they choose. And if they ask what you have become, what do I say? I smile. The smile is small and tired and sad and happy all at once. Tell them we have become gardeners, I say. Tell them the galaxy is our garden now and we are not its owners. We are only its caretakers. The garden does not belong to us. It belongs to itself. We just water it when it needs watering and we leave when our work is done. Tell them that. Tell them that there is no payment for a gardener's work except the joy of seeing things grow. Tell them that. Tell them everything. She lets go of my hand. She bows again, even more deeply than before. Then she turns and walks slowly back to her shuttle. She stops at the door. She turns to look at me one last time. Will I ever see you again? She asks. No, I say. I am very old and I am almost finished, but you will see other humans. You will see them in unexpected places, doing unexpected things, leaving small polite notes behind them. You will know us when you see us. We will be the ones who do not ask for credit. She nods. She steps into her shuttle. The shuttle lifts off the deck and returns to her silver leaf ship. The leaf ship turns and begins the long journey home. I stand at the railing for a long time after they are gone. The stars are very bright. The galaxy is very quiet. Somewhere far behind me, in a small house with a small garden, an old Ilithi woman is waiting to hear what humanity has said. Somewhere in front of me, 11 million descendants of our oldest machines are continuing their patient work, unbothered by treaties or councils or the comings and goings of empires. Somewhere on Earth, in a small office 200 meters under the desert, a young engineer who is not yet born will one day take over the work that Myra Oak began, and the work that her mother began before her, and the work that began long before any of us. I take the small black coin out of my coat pocket, the coin I have carried for 203 years, the coin I pressed 3 times in the back of a shuttle on the day I sent the signal that opened the vault. I hold the coin against the wooden railing. I press it 3 times, slow and steady. 3 pulses go out into the dark. They are not words in any language the conquered can read. They are a heartbeat, a promise, a quiet little human goodbye to a long human chapter that has now finally, gently, come to an end. To anyone listening on the right channel in the right corner of the cold black space, the 3 pulses translate into one simple sentence. Close the vault. The vault was a tool. We built it for a hard time. The hard time is over. We do not need the tool anymore. We can put it down now the way a gardener puts down a shovel at the end of a long day's work. Tomorrow the gardener will pick up something else, a rake perhaps, or a watering can. The work continues. Only the tools change. The coin grows warm in my hand for half a second, then cools. The signal has gone. Somewhere far away in the cold quiet beyond our sun, 11 million machines and all their countless descendants gently change their patterns of work, the way a great forest changes its breathing in the autumn. They do not stop. They will never stop. They simply move into a new season. I tuck the coin back into my pocket. I sit down in my wooden chair. I look up at the stars. I am very tired. I have been alive for a very long time. I think perhaps I am ready to rest now. I think perhaps I have done my work, and the work that comes next will belong to people I will never meet, who will be kinder and wiser and stranger than I ever knew how to be. I close my eyes. The little wooden ship rocks gently in the empty dark. The stars wheel slowly past. Somewhere in a quiet desert, in a quiet garden, in a quiet corner of a galaxy that did not know how badly it needed gardeners, the work continues and will continue for as long as anyone is willing to do it. I let go of the wheel. I let go of the coin. I let go of the long, long story. I let go. The end.